Good morning. No one is here yet, but that's okay. Well, as soon as we get people in, we'll start our lecture. You should be receiving your information now that we are live. All right, looking like we got people on and awake this morning. People checking in on our attendance, which is fantastic. All right, we already got somebody in. All right, waiting for a few more. We'll get started with our morning lecture. All right. All right, good morning. Good morning. Oh, got a few more joining in here in a minute. All right. Hi, Faith. Good morning. How are you? Good morning, Gavin. We will get started soon. Hello, Gov. All right. Well, good morning, guys. We're going to wait till I get about a few more people in here and we'll get started right away. When you finish watching this, you need to go and watch the video I uploaded last night called The Greco-Persian War. There's a magic word in it somewhere. You're going to need that word to get a exit ticket from me. All right. Waiting for a few more and we will get started. It is not swordfish today. It's not always swordfish. It's just swordfish a lot. Good morning, Beryl. How are you? Good morning, Talon. I'm doing well, Beryl. I'm doing real well. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started if that works for you guys. You ready? All right, here we go. So, we've talked about Athens. Your video today that I made for you guys yesterday will be all about the Greco-Persian War, especially the Battle of Marathon and Sardis. But today I wanted to talk about another Greek city-state that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about. So we talked about Athens, how they developed democracy. Well, today we're going to talk about Sparta and talk about how it's a little bit different than the other city-states in the region. While most city-states were looking forward, Sparta more or less looked back. They were looking at their past to determine their future. In fact, uh, without the will of the gods, the Spartans never did anything. All right, they were a deeply religious people, specifically around the gods of war. But before we get going, I just want to make sure that you guys know the difference or know what a city-state is. All right, so I'd like to see somebody in the live chat bar go ahead and type out what a city-state is. Let's see who can do it. I'm looking for someone to tell me why. Tell me what a city state is. Why don't you give it a try, Daryl? No, a city-state is not a state with a government. Come on, you guys know this. What is a city-state? Come on, it wasn't that long ago. Come on. I need this, guys. What is a city-state? Let's see. Guys, we should know this off the top of our head by now. We said it enough. Very good, Faith. A city that with its surrounding territory forms an independent state. All right, guys. So a city state is a city that controls the area around it. And because it does that, it's its own independent country, or another word for independent country is state. Okay. So a city state is a city that controls a geographical area around it, and that makes it its own country or state. All right. Now, let's get back into talking about Sparta. So Sparta's history isn't as rich as the Athenian history, mostly because a lot of it is lost to time. The Spartans weren't big on writing things down. In fact, they really didn't put much stock in that. If it was going to be written down, it certainly wasn't going to be by the soldiers. They were all fighting, or that was the job that they believed in. All right, Sparta, when we think about Sparta, we were going to use the word martial. All right, we're going to use the word martial. Martial meaning combative, like the martial arts. All right. So if karate is a martial art, people that practice it are martial. All right. We used to use a term called the martial races. At least the British use that term to describe people or peoples that were better at fighting or more prone to fight. For instance, there is a religion called the Sikhs, and the British would bring these people into their army because the Sikhs believe that if you pull a knife, right, if they pulled their knife in battle or in anger, that they couldn't return it to its scabbard without blood being on it, meaning they couldn't go back home unless they were effective in battle. And that is the same thing with the Spartans. They believe very much that battle was where a man proved himself, not only to his family and to his city, but also to the gods. He proved himself on the battlefield, and so they very much focused on that. We see that very early on. The Spartan civilization was similar to the Mycenaeans. They were ruled by a king, and then we kind of lose track of them. They enter a dark ages right after the Mycenaeans fall. We really don't hear much about them. But it's believed that the Spartans' legendary history took place during the Dark Age. That this time when we don't really know much information on it is when the city was at its height of its power. All right, this is what Herodotus hints at, and this is what Ligas hints at when they talk about this time period. They talk about how the Spartans actually controlled all the Peloponnesus. Remember, that's that lower part of Greece. They controlled all of it with extreme power and ability. All right, so when we look back into that era, it's that dark age. It's during that time when nothing's being written down that Spartan is most heard of. All right, it's by the time the Spartans start coming back to power is right before the Greco-Persian War, and the Spartans start building larger armies. Um, they look at populations at Sparta around 20,000 to 35,000 men, 35,000 people. So anywhere between 10,000 to 15,000 men in their military at any given time. They also had a massive slave population. So Sparta was very dependent on slavery as a means of being able to develop their crops, develop their civilization. The men weren't farmers. They weren't doctors. They weren't lawyers typically. These were fighting peoples. All right. They were more than capable of developing a society, but they focused all their energy instead into warfare, and they were the best at it. At a very young age, and I know I've told you guys this before, boys were taken from their families. They were trained to be soldiers. All right, they would wake up and they'd work with a shield and sword and spear, every single day. This would go all the way into their 30s. They're constantly training. And then when it was time, they'd go off and they'd fight. And they fought very frequently. They'd go attack other city-states. They'd bring back people to be their slaves. And that's how Sparta really survived, was attacking other civilizations, taking what they needed, and returning to Sparta. It made them extremely powerful. All right. What, Gavin? Yeah, Gavin, I like this better because you guys aren't playing around. All right. So, as Sparta is starting to really develop and flex its might, we see these major advancements in warfare. So the Spartans gain the use of bronze in their weapons, in their armor. Bronze, again, guys, like I told you before, bronze is a great metal if you had the resources to do it. The Greeks, lucky enough, had both tin and copper. They could make bronze weapons. They weren't affected as much as the Iron Age as other civilizations. So the Assyrians were using iron weapons. The Greeks never had to do that. They did eventually, but they never had to do it. They had bronze. And again, like I said, bronze is just as effective as iron. Really, their densities are so very similar that it's not much of a difference. So when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, you really don't need to change too much of your kit to be effective. And the Spartans surely didn't. They won decisive victories for the Greeks, especially when we talk about the Battle of Thermopylae, which you guys will be doing research on and showing me what these battles looked like. They were very effective in their war fighting. They were incredible soldiers, right? But let's talk about the women. So the women of Sparta. The women of Sparta actually had a much better life than the women of Athens. The women of Sparta were allowed to pick their husbands. The women of Sparta were trained to run the household. So they were in charge of making sure everything was taking place, whether that is groceries were bought, the children were raised. Women took care of a lot. In fact, a lot of them were very prevalent in the government as well. They were trained to fight too as young women, but they were trained to wrestle. They got to pick who they were going to marry. They picked out of the litter of men. They decide, hey, that guy looks real strong. That's going to be my husband. So women in Sparta had a much higher place than those in Athens or any other Greek city-state at the time, which is quite an incredible advancement, thinking that Sparta would be the one that is so prolific in advancing women, when most of the time Greece really doesn't care, or Greek history really doesn't give women any roles whatsoever. Sparta's actually one that's saying, we don't care. We need to go out and we need to capture more soldiers. So you really get to see a difference there. So now when you look at the differences between Athens and Sparta, right? Athens is this powerhouse, this navy. It's got lots of civilization or lots of citizens, and they develop a more classical sense of civilization. They develop the arts, they develop literature, they develop philosophy, they develop arithmetic and science. Arithmetic's another word for math, guys. I know we don't use that too much, but we see that Athens is this center for learning. And then on the other side, we have Sparta. And Sparta is not a center for learning. The Spartans lived as harsh a lifestyle as possible. Their beds were probably pieces of straw or littered on the ground, right? They probably slept on straw on the ground. It was a hard lifestyle. It was a tough lifestyle. They said the food was terrible. In fact, one historian writing about Sparta said the food was so bad that that he would rather have not lived. All right. What a remarkable thing for anyone to say. Unbelievable, honestly. And so for the Spartans, that's their lifestyle, guys. They wanted it to be tough. They wanted it to be difficult. They wanted to fight for everything they had. Not the Athenians. They liked their pleasures. They liked to have good food and wine and have civilized talk and to have games. The Spartans didn't. They wanted it to be tough. They wanted to be made. There's an old saying that iron sharpens iron, right? You have to have two very difficult surfaces rubbing against each other to make something stronger and powerful. So the idea is you can make somebody stronger when they bump together and we really push that growing, right? That's the Spartan lifestyle. And we're going to see that Sparta throughout the years makes some bad decisions. In my video I made earlier, I mentioned that at the Battle of Marathon, Sparta's not there. Well, they're not there because they're celebrating a religious festival. All right. So when we really look at history between Athens and Sparta, we've got to be able to compare the two, right? Sparta is focused on their military, they're focused on their infantry, they're focused specifically on maintaining the status quo. They actually have two kings, one to be in charge of the military and one to be in charge of Sparta as itself. All right, they actually have a council as well. They would go to the Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi, again, was a seer, was a group of women who lived over a volcanic vent and would prophesy or give prophecies to the Greeks that came to ask for their help. All right. So when we understand this history, we really need to be able to compare the two. Athens is all about learning. Athens is all about understanding what's going on in the material world around us. Right. The Athenians are able to predict later on how large the earth is. Okay. They figure out the circumference of the earth within a few miles. It's absolutely astronomically impossible to do that. And they do it. All right. They're brilliant. So we have this absolute society developed on learning compared to a sea state that is devoted to the military mindset, to military war, to militarism. And these two are hated enemies, and at times they're trusted allies. They really can either get along or they end up hating each other. It actually happens a lot. They will go and form alliances, and then they'll break those alliances, and they'll attack each other. We'll go over an entire war that's called, more traditionally, it's called the war between the elephant and the whale. All right, the elephant's the largest land mammal. It's the strongest land mammal versus the whale, the largest aquatic mammal. And again, how these two interact and fight each other depending on what their strengths are. And both sides recognize their strengths. They recognize how their society could be successful or not be successful. All right, guys. So that's going to finish up my my little lecture on Sparta. We'll be going into more information on the Greco-Persian War next week. We'll get out of that probably by Thursday, and then we'll move on into classical Greek period. We'll talk about people like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato. We will talk about lots of different ideas and thoughts that came out during this time period, including the last day of Socrates, who one of the better written pieces of Plato talking about his great teacher, Socrates. So that is where we're going. We will be there in the next few days. But what I need you guys to do now is I've left a video for you on the Battle of Marathon. All right. Plato, Plato, not Plato. Plato. All right. So I'm going to be on for live help. Again, only come in there if you need help on the video that I've given you. There will be a quiz up later that you guys are going to take. It's going to be about 3 questions. So it's more like an exit ticket than anything else. You're going to go ahead and take that, and you're going to make sure you send that to me. Okay, guys? All right. Any questions before I go? Meryl, are we going to study Africa? Probably not, unless we study in the lens of the Romans taking parts of Africa, specifically when we talk about Carthage. All right, and we talk about Africa a little bit when we talk about Egypt. Remember, Egypt is in Africa. All right, guys, enough about waffles. Any questions before I go? All right. What's next? Well, after we finish Greece, we'll go into Rome. If we get through Rome, we'll start talking about the Holy Roman Empire and the Dark Ages, and hopefully we can get into the Crusades. We'll see. There's not a lot of time. Will we talk? What about World War One? Certainly, we will not make it to there. World War One is so far in the future, and it's also not covered in ancient history textbooks. Are we going to do war? Are we going to talk about war? Yeah, we're going to talk about lots of wars. We still have lots of wars to get through. Specifically, my favorite set of wars, which is the Punic War, or the Punic Wars. There's 3 of them. All right. Okay, guys, I'm going to go into help session. Again, I've left a video on YouTube for you guys to watch called the Greco-Persian War. There's a magic word in there that you need to know in order to answer questions on the exit ticket. All right. Okay, guys, I will see you later.